Yeah, welcome again. The Mike Oldfield Discography podcast. 10th anniversary of Tubular Bells, the release of CRISES. It's a really special album to me because it's the very first album I bought with my own money at age 10. I was waiting for it to be released. I knew when the release date was. I somehow had read about that or like seen ads in the record store, and I remember going there. There were like big displays of the tower, the tower with the vinyl record, and I got it. I bought it. Yeah, that was something really special, and musically, you already mentioned that like this format of instrumental track on one side and songs or something else on the other got already started with 5 Miles Out. Now in CRISES we have sort of like the next step of that, where there's less instrumental music on the B-side. And yeah, I mean, like for me it's I'm so close with this record. I'd rather have you start with it, or maybe even like, when did you discover it?
That's a good question. I believe this was one of the very first I got from the music library in The Hague when I started borrowing CDs. So this must have been one of the very first. I do remember that I thought I loved this instantly, and it's, looking back now, I'm fascinated by the fact that I loved it instantly, because it's, as much as it was a commercial success, and it was a huge commercial success, I think I'm intrigued more and more by the album. And I think the second side, it doesn't have this, it's not a pure pop album as you would expect it if you only knew Moonlight Shadow. I think you'd be surprised if you only knew that song going into it. Yes, it is an album which has this format, one big piece, mostly instrumental, not entirely instrumental actually, on the A side, and then shorter songs on the B side. At the same time, I feel like the B side, these pieces could work as instrumentals, many of them. I know that Moonlight Shadow, that came originally from an instrumental jam the band had in the studio. That's what he says, at least. The first version. One? Moonlight Shadow.
No, yeah.
Actually, the CRISES.
I as far as I know, the basic tracks were recorded live in the studio, but it wasn't a jam.
Okay, maybe the wording is wrong, but it came from playing together in the studio.
Yes,
and it was instrumental at first, and then he tried to make it work as a song. And okay, you don't hear it anymore, but I mean, for example, a piece like In High Places, you mentioned this in the previous podcast about 5 Miles Out. That was already played earlier live.
Yes,
and I know the Gothenburg version of that, and it's essentially the same piece. I mean, that is, and it works. Maggie Riley is singing on it.
Yeah.
But it's hard to make out the vocals on the recording, I know. And
the chorus melody is different.
It's slightly different, but
the verse and the instrumental, but the instrumental track is the same. Yes.
And and I think that many of these pieces, I think, would work as instrumentals. He could have arranged it entirely differently, made it an instrumental, and that is what makes it so intriguing to me. I mean, we just, before we started, we came here from having just a short coffee break. And I think, to me, this is maybe his most accomplished studio recording. There's different philosophies to what a recording should be. I know, for example, my friend Jeffrey Roden, the composer, he loves, for an album, for musicians to come into the studio, maybe put down 1 or 2 takes, and that's it. So he really loves the idea of a studio recording being just a slightly more perfect, like a more perfect idea of the live recording.
Yeah.
And to me, I like belabored processes where the artist spends a long time in the studio to get everything. Like, I like artifice. I don't mind it. I like it. And I think this album is it sounds so incredible. It's such a sultry, sensual recording, and the integration of the acoustic and the electronic elements. So what I take from it is, I think this is his hands down his best, most accomplished studio recording. I love everything about it. It's almost to the point where I find it hard to say anything meaningful about it, because I get lost in the music. Just the beauty, the dynamic quality of it, and the sensuality. I think it's a really, like pieces like Foreign Affair and In High Places, they could, like with most artists, this would be kitsch. I think in this case, it's just gorgeous. Just really.
Yeah. Like, one of the things that I, as a musician or as an artist, one of the most important insights I had is that music is about the vibe. So it's not really like, I can talk about like the background of the composition and blah blah forever, but it doesn't, like, if it doesn't have the vibe, it just doesn't make it. It's about the vibe, and this record has a vibe, like, like, and especially tracks like Foreign Affair, which is such a bold statement with just the drum groove, and then like there's no guitar on it. There's bass guitar on it, which, funnily enough, in the credits here in the re-release edition, this hasn't been done with lots of care. Like, there are so many mistakes in this, so we don't really we can't trust this what's written down here. But anyway, like the fact that he was kind of like trying to move away from what he was known for is just wonderful. And Foreign Affair is just a magical little track with a magical mood.
Yeah, there's what is the lyric? The word "cool" comes in there, right? And Maggie Riley, she sings like, her voice is like icicles, beautiful icicles that melt, and it melts me. I think it's a most incredible studio voice, vocal performance, and it's entrancing also because it keeps repeating at the end and repeating, and it's, I don't know, it is, as you say, it's really a mood piece.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what kind of this record is. If you think about it, like, all the pieces are just kind of like mood pieces. Yes. Yeah, exactly. And even something like Shadow on the Wall, something that a lot of people don't like, I think it's kind of very powerful and cool and reduced, and so
Yes, I was surprised how many people don't like it, but I suppose, I don't know how familiar you are with Twin Peaks, but in the first scene, the pilot of that has a scene pretty much at the beginning where the mother gets the call that her daughter has died, and many people laughed at that scene because they thought it was so over the top that it was comical. But there's a difference between playing for laughs or playing it so in a way that it can become comical, but there's a huge difference. And I think this piece is over the top, and also the singing is over the top, but it needs it. And I think I'm glad he went for this performance, because it's just one outburst of energy. And the guitars mirror that, and it's there's no irony in it at all, and that's what makes it great, I think.
Yeah, and like, it's the Simon Phillips influence here as well. Like, this was the record where Mike asked Simon Phillips to co-produce it with him, and I think I mentioned that a few podcasts ago, that Simon Phillips really is maybe at that time like the most futuristic sounding drummer, with like, even though he comes from the 70s and he was already successfully drumming in the 70s, with the sound that is just so modern, contemporary, not modern, contemporary at the time, and really the kind of groove and sort of like, groove is not actually, so like, these songs, they don't have the traditional beat to them. right? Like where it's more
Yeah.
like, and how should I say this? It's sort of like already kind of foreshadowing the development where drummers later on in the 90s, they learned to play like a drum machine. And in a way, Simon Phillips here is already playing a little bit like a drum machine that like it's more like a percussion arrangement than just a beat.
Yeah.
And still very simple and minimal and groovy, right?
There are actually online threads in forums where people seriously ask, is it just the Lindrum or is there a drummer on there? And I think that's not I don't think that's intended to be negative about the way the percussion channel. It just means he plays it borderline at the border between those two, the human and the machine. And that's incredible, actually.
Yeah, and it sounds so rich at the same time, right? It's not you couldn't get that with a drum machine, this kind of sound. But really, like it was the time of the gated reverb and stuff, you know, and you hear some of that on Crises on the track.
Yeah.
Right, but so it has the sound of its time. Also, it's the Quantec Room Simulator, which is the reverb. I was going to say plugin. the reverb, device they used for this record that gives it that expansive quality.
Oh, it was expensive, actually.
And expansive.
Oh, expansive.
Yeah.
It actually cost 25,000 marks, I read.
Okay.
Which was insane.
Yes. But it's also it has the neat computer-aided mixing console on it, like where things would. Like Mike would kind of like experiment more and more with that, then albums like Islands and even, or maybe even Sounds of Distant Earth, like where the automation is sort of like part of the composition and stuff. It kind of starts here a little bit, where like 5 Modes Out has like 1.5 feet in the olden days.
Yeah.
This one is sort of like both feet in modern technology somehow, and like there's only started recording Crisis in November 82. So it's like and finished in April 83. It's quite something, and it's just such a different vibe, and I think Simon Phillips got a lot to do with it, probably, and we don't really know what he was allowed to contribute. Again, this is and I use this term loosely, allowed, because it's just like the dynamic between people. You don't really know who does what and who has a say, and also like realizing like this is something that I learned later, actually pretty well, not so much later, but when the so-called maxi singles in Germany were released of Shadow on the Wall and Moonlight Shadow, you realize that the versions on the album are actually shortened versions of the original versions. It's not that the extended versions were extended from the originals, it was the other way around. So Shadow on the Wall had a whole other section.
Moonlight Shadow had an
additional verse even, right? And the intro is much longer.
Yeah.
And the album version only, starts after the original intro and stuff like that, right? And these additional like offbeat melodies he's playing in the extended version of Moonlight Shadow, it's really nice. So you can see that somehow this format of the shorter pieces on one side is really something that I don't want to say that it's certainly wasn't an afterthought.
No.
But in technical terms, in order to make this fit on a vinyl record on two sides, the songs had to be shortened.
Yep. Pretty sure.
Isn't that amazing? Like if you think about it, right? So
yes, I think to the advantage of pretty much everything on there. There's in High Places, the end of In High Places sounds like it did go on, and I sometimes wish for it to go on. But there is a certain beauty in in the fact that some of this, it leaves it more floating. Everything floats into the next piece.
Yeah.
Even though it's like stylistically, this is so diverse. It is, I mean, Moonlight Shadow and Foreign Affair, the two pieces with Maggie Ryle, they're so different.
Yeah.
And still he makes it work. That is quite remarkable.
Yeah, and In High Places is really kind of like, again, rhythmically an interesting piece, because it has the like shaving off beats at the end of the bar kind of effect, where there's like a basically a 4/4, but then the 4/4 turns into a 7/8 and sometimes into a 6/8, and you get like these different ways that it rolls around, let's say. And then ending with what sounds like something that's kind of trapped in a delay, but it's played. It's like a 7/8 loop at the end, and it's kind of cool. It's kind of progressive, and I don't know how much that also influenced his idea to get John Anderson involved.
I have the quote about how they met, which is really interesting. I hope I wrote it. There was a really good piece on the recording of Crises.
I don't think I've read that. But
I can't find it right now. But the thing is that he met John Anderson when Anderson was with Vangelis.
Yes.
And put together, and then they were working on some stuff, and so that was how that contact came about. I don't think he sought him out from like intrinsic, like some idea he had. He met, and then they started talking. But he picked the right piece for him. I think it's there's I saw versions of it with Brian Palmer, where Brian Palmer sings this live. Barry Palmer.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, and he doesn't have the range, unfortunately.
He does make a good performance, I think, but it's such a different.
Yeah. No. It's perfect for John Anderson. Like, because originally it was Maggie Riley singing it, so you had to have somebody with such a high voice and that kind of angelic thing, and really the I don't know like who's credited for the vocals, but I think it's probably Mike Oldfield, right?
For the lyrics?
For the lyrics of In High Places.
I think it's John Anderson for the lyrics, because the music is obviously entirely Mike.
Yeah, okay. Because
it says here lyrics Mike Oldfield and John Anderson in my disky version.
Yeah, so but the because I'm thinking of the live version that I heard on the '82 tour, and there were lyrics. And now I remember how Mike introduced it. He said, "Now it's a song about little people or something."
Yes, exactly. Elves or something, and people live under the ground. I can't remember.
Yeah, okay. It's funny. Yeah, but you're right. Those weren't the real lyrics. And then, like In High Places, like this reference to being high, and like the
which was then later used by Kanye West.
Yes, exactly.
In a different context.
Yes, but but anyway, like this reference to sort of like some sort of drug experience, that's also something that's pretty new or unique, like to this record, that there's actually, right?
It's funny. I never actually made that connection, because it also uses the word navigator to guide us. I always assumed it had something to do with flight. Now you mention it.
Navigator to heaven, but
it's pretty
something,
It's pretty obvious, I guess.
Yeah, it is. And that was those were the years of where like you almost have to say everybody, obviously it wasn't everybody, was doing cocaine and marijuana, and like I wasn't there, and I wouldn't have liked to be there, I guess. Even but I made 2 longish interviews with Ant Glynn, who was playing guitars on this record, and and he alluded to that quite often in the conversation, that there was a lot of drugs around. So that's why maybe that's what In High Places is about. But like going back to like the idea that it's sort of a progress rock song, simple, miniature, having Simon Phillips play the drums again makes all the difference, because the version before that I heard before was very simplistic and there was no real drum part. But now with Simon's drumming, it's like that is a real part.
Yeah.
So like it's part of the music. You can't take it. If you take it away, it just is not the same thing.
Yeah.
And I guess it's sort of like a double kick drum kind of thing that he's using there as well, to have like the pulsing going on, and to also like have the combination of Simon Phillips and Pierre Milan playing together, like Pierre playing the vibraphone. And again, like this is something I remember, that like jumping a little bit, like both the In High Places and Foreign Affair riffs that we hear that are played by synthesizers or by the Fairlight or whatever, they are originally, I think they're guitar patterns. Because in the live versions, you can hear Mike playing those, and then you realize, it's not really something that sounds like something you would need to transcribe for guitar, but it's something that just lies like a natural thing on guitar.
That would be interesting, because as a former keyboard player, I always found In High Places had a very interesting riff. It doesn't really sound like it was developed by someone thinking from the keys.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, it's like it's the hammering motion between like a root note and some top notes, like the Tubular Bells theme. That's what it is. And like, okay, like this is something that we absolutely need to mention, and now we're already quite a few minutes into but this is the first time that he kind of like pretty boldly makes a new version of Tubular Bells, because that's what the track Crises is. It's like a variation on the theme and the themes of Tubular Bells. And funnily enough, like remember when we were talking about 5 Miles Out, saying that it was such a happy thing, right? Like now here he takes the Tubular Bells theme and turns it into major, and it's not minor anymore, and it's quite fascinating. And also mixing things up with Omadon. Also Crises, the finale of Crises is sort of a reference to Omadon, like the fast strummed acoustic guitars, like very much the same, and the tempo also. I haven't really checked, but it feels like it's very similar, the tempo. So
yes, we can go. I wanted to one thing, because structurally, because Tom mentioned one long piece and on one side and the short on the others. What do you make of the reversal of that in the North American edition? Because in North America and Canada, obviously they had the shorter pieces on the A side, and they also included one more piece. Mistake.
Yeah, I think for me that doesn't make any sense. I think it's a bastardization, as they say. No, it's not. It's not. I don't count that as something proper. It's not what the artist intended.
No, I agree, and I also don't like Mistake particularly all that much.
I like the song as a standalone song, but it has nothing to do with this record. It's a Mike Oldfield group song that they did maybe like when they were doing Family Man, right? And it's a cool little tune, but where Mike was playing bass, right? Like that was his role in the Mike Oldfield group. Mike was the bass player, and and Rick Fenn and Tim Rennick like were playing guitar. So anyway, like
it is interesting to me in a way that they were all surprised that Moonlight Shadow was turned into a hit. I think that was what I take from it, because if you put out the record with a 20-minute piece on the A side, and you put a song which will later go on to be the biggest hit in Europe of that year on the B side, and actually on the North American version they put another song in front of it. So that means they had no clue how big this was going to be. No one had any idea.
Yeah, but it wasn't big in the US at all.
It wasn't big in the US.
Yes,
No.
yes.
So maybe
But
they did get that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I have a kind of love-hate relationship with Moonlight Shadow. I mean, like for me, it's difficult to say hate because I always thought it, you know, I didn't really get it, but I do, and it's so incredibly powerful and gives me goosebumps these days. This song, where I was like always, you know, not for me. What I loved about it was that Mike headed it. I love that he managed to do something that opened new doors for him, and I thought that was so cool. Like that's what I like in people who are creative and like forward thinking and like changing and trying to do new things. Like if they actually have success with that concept, right? Because it's such a rare thing, especially these days, right? And so I liked it for that. And I like the extended version, which, as we know, was probably the original. You know, like I wasn't aware that you already said that they, you know, Moonlight Shadow was recorded live. The backing tracks were recorded live in the studio, and Phil Spalding is playing the bass, and it's a fretless bass. On I think up to this point on Mike's records, there has not been a fretless bass. I think this is the first time it makes an appearance. And I may be wrong, but like, but I like these little nuggets, like where you see, okay, wow, and then realizing like the re-recording of Tubular Bells, the re-recording 2003, right, which is cool, actually uses fretless bass guitar instead of the and that is so cool.
I like that as well.
Yeah, and just this, you know. Anyway,
it is definitely it's a weird song, and it's weird for it to become such a hit. The production, when I listen to the production, I think the production is completely different than all of the other ones, all the other songs. And it starts, I think what's really curious is it starts off very naked. There's a very naked beginning, and then when the Fairlight comes in, it suddenly gets all the atmosphere. And then on the other hand, you have the acoustic guitar strumming, which is really naked again, but it's very on top. And then
didn't he say in the autobiography that that was the original idea that started the song, was to play the acoustic guitar very hard?
I don't think it's in the, but we might have said it.
I think it is in there. Okay. Like where I said, like the original idea was just, he had only the idea, he wanted to write a song and he wanted to play the acoustic guitar very hard. And that's how the diddling kind of thing happened. Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to.
No, and I hear, for example, the K's, in Maggie Riley's enunciation, she said, carried away. The K's, they're really, I don't know, it's a mistake to me. But it all gives the song so much character. So
what do you mean?
Carried away. It's carried away.
Yeah.
I mean, I would correct that as a producer. I would not leave that in. It's almost like the P, but she does it with the K's almost everywhere in the song. So I think the description of the process was sort of taking it word by word almost, and it sounds that way almost, like it's still in the finished version. It doesn't seem organic, but this is a song with there's so much I remember it by. I think that's what makes it interesting for me. It's not. It doesn't sound like a move into a commercial direction, because it's willful. It's different. It's
Yes, I mean, like this is also like the album where he first brings out the Stratocaster and plays it as, like, finds a new sound for himself.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it really is. Like, and he said that he was inspired by Mark Knopfler, actually. So like the solo here in Moonlight Shadow is sort of like a Mark Knopfler reference.
That's interesting.
And it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, so like for me, it took a while also to understand that basically the solo, which is a written solo, repeats twice. Once it's played with a clean sound on the Strat, and then it's played again with a distorted sound. Like, so first is more of a chordal approach, and then it's like just a single note approach with distortion. and like for me to realize it's exactly the same melody, like took a while, because like the way that it stacks, let's say, in the composition, in the flow of the composition, is like, okay, this is a new part, but it's wonderful.
I also, if you look at the lyrics, it reads almost like a folk song, because it has this structure, a line, and then carried away by a moonlight shadow, then another line, carried away by a moonlight shadow, which seems very folky to me. But then it doesn't go on like that. So it juxtaposes different ways of working with words, which is also, again, creative, really creative.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure that this is in the autobiography where he says that he got the rhyming dictionaries and like sitting down and trying to write this.
I have my, like, it's really, I doubt that he wrote this alone. I know the story is that he said he took some wine and he took a rhyming dictionary and penned it down. The night before Maggie Riley came to the studio, it's so different from all the other lyrics he's written. I mean, obviously it's not impossible. I just wonder. Also the fact that he says it's not about John Lennon's murder, and it seems, I don't know, it seems pretty obviously to be about it. I mean, there's all these, the slight variations in the facts, to me, that makes it even more about it.
Hey, so what do you think about that extra verse in the extended version?
Isn't that just about him being in a crowd? Doesn't that just explain the 105?
Yeah, maybe.
Do we have it in front of us somewhere?
No, I don't have it here.
Yeah.
I only like remember that because it's a different grammatical construction, right? The last time ever she had seen him, I think, is the. But yeah, I mean, isn't it? I mean, for me, like back in the day, the song didn't have any meaning. Like it was only in a way, I felt like he just put some random elements that he knew were gonna kind of like work and put them together.
Yes.
Like just like even like Moonlight Shadow is ridiculous. Like even just the title, right? In a way.
You know, where I'm almost on the same page with you, but I did like it, and I think the moment in the song where I start really liking is where it's this echo effect on her voice, which is I think I watch the end.
Yeah.
Because that is, again, there's no echo anywhere before, and there's no after that.
Yeah.
And it somehow takes the song. This is a constant between something that's very real, and then it goes into this dreamlike state.
Yes, yeah.
I think I was taken by this switching, and then the end obviously soars, and I like that. But I agree, it's sort of a grab bag. It's really.
It's sort of like the lyric is sort of, and I like that about it. Like you say, it's kind of obvious, right, what it's about. But for me, it has that. Almost like a John Anderson lyric, like where it's just like there's a lot of room to interpret it, but there's really no meaning behind it.
Yeah.
And in a way, to me, it's like phrases put together that sort of create an atmosphere, like what I was saying, like it's mood pieces. And in a way, the lyrics are mood pieces as well, especially For an Affair too, for me.
Yeah.
It's like this mood piece, and then Shadow on the Wall as well, right? Like even though that is more obviously descriptive, let's say, right? And yeah, I mean, Moonlight Shadow and Shadow on the Wall. So what is it about shadows on this record? Well,
yeah,
the cover, right?
The Watcher on the Tower.
Yes, and the shadow of the tower. I don't know. It's but it's cool. As you can see, it's a concept. The album has a concept, right? Like the cover ties in with the lyric of the Crisis track. You have the shadow, you have the moon.
I saw iterations of the of that painting. There are actually earlier versions where it's more populated, which is also I think gives a hint to, as you call it, a mood piece. The earlier version had more people in there. So if you look at this pier, like where he's watching from Fridays to his side, there were originally more people. So now it's, I think he moved it more into the night, into solitude, and which I think reflects more this sort of in between feeling of in betweenness. What's the time in Moonlight Shadow? 4 a.m.
4 a.m.
4 a.m. is actually in Ayurveda, and that's a meaningful time because it's in between the turning point.
Yes.
And it's the time when your body starts awakening. Even if you get up much later, that's the moment when the body temperature is at its lowest, and many people wake up naturally.
I remember people making fun of it, that it says 4 a.m. in the morning, which, but I always understood it as 4 a.m., comma, in the morning. That's how I heard it.
There's lots of commas in that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and then even then it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it's sort of like, it's like, and maybe you're right with that, like it's 4 a.m. in the morning. So like, it's important, right? Yes. You're repeating that information to say, okay, this is important, and we don't know why. but it's kind of funny that you see that that's what makes this record so special. Like now we're getting the songwriting aspect to be also about some sort of lyrical contribution that Mike and maybe others made.
Yeah.
And I think that's a unique thing. And like, okay, what are the lyrics on side one, in the track Crisis, right? Like the watcher and the tower waiting hour by hour, and like the other parts I don't remember now what he's saying there. And then crisis, you can't get away, right? That's it, right?
Yeah. I wondered maybe one thing about Moonlight Shadow is that, of course, when I don't know if are these early versions, there's no record of those, right? The ones you recorded earlier. There was one with Hazel O'Connor.
I don't know if there actually was one, but there was talk of doing one. Like.
She was in the studio, actually.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
So they did do something together.
But isn't it? I heard that it was actually not necessarily that song. It was the other song, "Man in the Rain."
Yes.
That later.
Yes, it was. But I understood it to be a different version of the same song. I mean,
I'm just saying. I don't know for sure.
Okay, the thing I'm wondering about is, because we've talked about his choice of collaborators for his ideas in the previous podcasts. I'm really wondering sometimes why he picked people. It must, like Maggie Riley, he knew Maggie Riley and had worked with her before. And he describes that she started at the beginning of belting it out. But then he knew what she was like and what her preferences were. And Hazel O'Connor, I mean, she has a very distinct voice, which is very different from Maggie O'Reilly. So I really wonder the choice, what he was looking for. It's really curious. I can see, I mean, her performance in Foreign Affair is incredible. Yeah. And she just holds back. But this one is really, something's different here on Moonlight Shadow. It's, I wonder why he picked why he picked her for this piece. I don't know if you have any ideas.
Yeah. I mean, I guess he was. I don't know. Let's just after the fact, we can say she was perfect for it.
After the fact, it's absolutely clear. Yeah. Do you think that? I mean, do you think he picks collaborators because he wants what they do in their other projects in his music, or do you think it's more of that there's an approach that is similar, and then let's see what happens if he comes or she comes into my studio and world?
It's a good question. I think knowing Mike through his music, that probably he wants a little bit of both. Like what I was saying, about guitarists. There's something that he likes. Yeah. Like Ant Glynn, which I think was a great, or is a great, like rhythm and blues guitarist, but with a British background. Yeah. and Mike liked that and wanted some of that on this record, and then got him involved. And with Maggie Riley, he had already known for at this time like 5 years almost, right? So there's a history. There's both a history and also like we were talking about Morris Peart. Like you bring somebody like that into the studio who's a composer, that you can expect more than just a player.
Yeah.
And I think here with the singers, it's maybe just about like finding something that gels, because as you know, like when you're creative, you're starting out and like maybe you have some sort of vision, but it's very rare that you have a totally formed picture or image like for this. And
if you take Massive Attack, for example, where one of the 90s poster boy projects for working with external vocalists. So when they work with Elizabeth Fraser, it sounds like the Cocteau Twins, but then in the world of Massive Attack. Or if they work with Sinead O'Connor, her voice is her voice, and then it's somehow in a new context on the album. Sharon Nelson, etc., etc. But with Maggie Riley, he's going for the exact opposite. He's putting her in the most uncomfortable place. If she's coming from a soul and sort of almost disco funk background, he's putting her in a place where everything she.
But she's also Scottish, and she has also folklore background because of that. I mean, I don't find it that shocking. But you're right. Like if we're thinking like the choice of John Anderson, right? He does. How much does he really sound like John Anderson on this track in High Places? He does. But still, like when I play this track to people that don't know it, and people who know John Anderson, they're kind of like at first, is that John Anderson? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is John Anderson. So there's something, and again, I think it's like this idea of the mood piece, right? So maybe that's what we're kind of like talking about here, that the vocal sound is part of that mood.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like what I guess in the end, an artist who wants to create art that is impactful is going to go for.
In a way, because you mentioned the painting is sort of, there's a very close relationship between the painting and the lyrics, but the lyrics don't explicitly tell a story. It's sentences which open. It's like a haiku almost. It's not in its form, but it opens up a resonance space where the words take on a poetic meaning.
Yes, and resonance space. Because I think that the color, this green, these tones of green, very much remind, like the sound of the synthesizers from CRISES, the Oberheim, and with a Pontiac room simulator reverb. That's sort of like the color, the feeling of those sounds. Absolutely. Is that color.
I would thought, totally, to me too.
Isn't that amazing?
That is weird. Yeah.
And it's weird. So I'm wondering if it's really the graphic that created also that sonic image somehow. I don't know.
It's, by the way, we were talking about the cover. I just remembered that one of my, probably our favorite bands, Tangerine Dream, actually for a very long time had, I think it was the sun on their covers. On every single cover they had from a certain time on, there was a small sun in the cover. So this is sort of, there's a circle. This one is sort of the counterpoint to that. It's also, it's a moon, but it's similar. It's the same shape. Dominates the front cover.
And actually, it's that what is kind of special about the tower to me is that there's light in one window.
Oh yes, that's true.
Yeah, like this record, like we've talked about it, like mostly, let's say, superficially at this point, not so much about the music itself. And I think that's really what is special about this record, that it kind of is something that was more mainstream in that regard, that you didn't have to have an appreciation of the music before you could appreciate it.
Yes.
Right? Because that's usually what happens with people that make great art, is that you have to come also from a perspective of wanting to experience art. And somehow with this record, he managed to go to open up in a way that others were invited.
Yes.
And if you think about it, it's really only the track Moonlight Shadow that does that, that did that commercially, right? So, but then this record was huge, right? I mean, I don't know anything about the sales numbers, but it was certainly his biggest hit.
Moonlight Shadow sold 1 million copies, and I think the album sold somewhere around 5 or 6.
Wow.
I have to look it up. Tubular Bells 2 was sold less, and it sold 2 million, so it has to be in excess of 2 million.
Yes, okay. Yeah.
Pretty incredible. I think and adding to the mood idea is, we mentioned the room simulator, which was attractive because it uses a completely different concept and technology of creating digital room.
Yeah.
And it, as I mentioned, it cost 75,000 mark at the time. I don't know what that translates to in dollars at that time.
Expensive.
Really, really expensive. But he used it, and you hear it on the very first seconds of CRISES.
Yes.
So I think for him to create this album with the idea of a vibe, that's why he bought it.
Yeah, exactly.
He makes it very clear at the very beginning. You hear the space that he has in his mind, and you enter the space, and then the music unfolds in the space. That's why the opening is so withheld.
Yes, and the opening and the closing parts are so amazing. Like I said, like Taurus 2 ends with that scissor sound with the backwards delay. And then here now we get, not only do we get an ending to the epic piece, we get an intro actually. And you will like this. So and we know that like after the intro we get the major version of the Tubular Bells theme, right? So Tubular Bells does not have an intro before the first section.
Yeah.
But Tubular Bells 2 does.
2, yeah.
Right? And so in a way I see this album as sort of like the modification of the concept of Tubular Bells, where there's something happening before it goes to that, right?
Yes.
And isn't that great?
Yeah.
Like, and then the track CRISES, going through different little pieces that are like more or less developed, right? Most of them are sort of like a rock band playing in the studio kind of vibe, really like the first half.
Yeah.
And then the second half, like where the space opens up and everything goes like mostly synthesized with acoustic drums, right? Where the acoustic drums take the lead part for like riffs, where the drum is not playing grooves but riffs, you could say. And then there is the huge drum solo in the middle. And now here's something that I don't know if you're aware of. In 1984, I think, so a year after, David Bedford released I don't know, there was the premiere of his Symphony No. 1, his first symphony.
You showed me this one.
And there is the final section, the final movement of Symphony No. 1 has the CRISES theme.
Yeah.
Which is unbelievable, right? It's the theme that was happening under the drum solo. And it's in the same key, even same tempo. It's incredible. Like that is something that I would have loved to have an opportunity to ask David Bedford or Mike for that matter. Like if and how that happened.
Yeah.
That is just kind of out of this world. This kind of, I really encourage everybody to try to find that.
So there's no recording of that.
There's a recording, yes, and you can find it on streaming services. It's fascinating, right? And again, then everything kind of like builds with that drum solo, kind of reminiscent of Armageddon already there with the drums, and then kind of explodes into this almost like an ambient groove of strummed acoustic guitar, very fast 16th notes, with then a sort of like one of that, like not screaming that much at first, kind of like melodies on top, right, of the guitar, and with the bass, there's like no bass guitar throughout this.
Yeah.
At the finale, just on the one of every 8 bars, it goes bad, the bass, like bad, and 4 bars pass, and a bit bad, and that's the only bass note there. It's like so cool. And then it changes harmony, and we have the last 4 or 8 bars of the composition, and then we have the big chord at the end, and then we have the beautiful little outro with a dissonant, really dissonant.
I think finales work based on expectations, and I think this one plays with that again and makes it work. To me, actually, in a way, the finale's biggest finale, like the explosion, is already early, and then it return, like it goes back into it, and then the drums come in, and it keeps building.
And it's a little bit like Amarok.
It's a little bit like Amarok, but Amarok, of course, has this 1.5 minute, or maybe just a minute, I don't know, big surge at the very end.
Yes, yeah.
I listened to that just a little bit before, and I almost had tears in my eyes again. I was surprised how much that still worked.
Yes, yeah.
And so here he almost has, I don't know, I feel like it's more, he stays in the mood again and lets it float. And I like this, the idea that you've already given us the big moment, and now we get to just enjoy being in the build-up and the expectation, because the expectation is very often more beautiful than the actual resolution.
Yes, and like I said about like the dissonance of the outro, right? So because the way, and this ties in with the space and with the room simulator here, where the pitches are F sharp, A, B natural, C natural, F natural. So really like the F sharp and the F natural kind of like really fighting, but melodically you could say it works. Like if you just play those notes in sequence, it works as a melody. But what happens here is with the room simulator, which sustains all the notes in the background. Yeah. So the reverb stays in the room, and you have this droning dissonance. Yeah. I love that, because the track does not resolve. And this is also like why it makes sense to listen to it on CD. Then it resolves with the first notes of Moonlight Shadow.
Yeah.
So there's no resolution at the end of the crisis, but Moonlight Shadow gives the resolve, and that's just also like in terms of like a sort of like a narrative, let's say. It's beautiful. And
it puts another dent into the reversal of the sides on the North American version.
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah, it doesn't work at all.
I also really like the sequencer line. I'm not quite sure if it's actually sequenced as such, or if it's played and then repeated. On the live versions, it's almost like verbatim. It's exactly the same.
It's played.
It has to be played, and that's what.
Played and with a delay, but it's with a delay.
It's amazing to believe
it's got to be played into a delay, to get that effect.
What is so different about this is, first of all, the length of the sequence, and then that it constantly jumps between passages where it's rhythmical and then it's melodic. That is really unusual. Great synthesizer lines, sequencer lines, from Tangerine Dream have this quality, but it's usually much shorter. And this is such a long.
It's long, and it has sections.
Yeah.
So it changes tonality. It's not like something that people were doing with sequences back in the day. But as we already said with Mount Tidy, like on 5 Months Out, there was already a tendency to program longer phrases and stuff. So it's a good question. Like it must have been on the record. It's probably programmed.
I just was.
But I don't know. Like nobody knows.
You didn't see him on the tour, on any tour where he played that live?
I saw the '84 tour, yes. But that was when the Fairlight was like the centerpiece on stage, and basically they played to a backing track that was coming from the Fairlight. So it was like even though, I mean, it was great to be there, but that's maybe my most least favorite of his tours ever, the '84 tour, because it was basically them playing to a backing track.
That's exactly what Tangerine Dream did in the 80s as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like that, and as I've said, like the sound of the Fairlight worked really well in the studio production, because like if you massaged it in the mix, it sounded great, but having it just like dry, it sounds like a 1996 sound card, General MIDI kind of sounds, kind of thing. And there are bootlegs out there of just the Fairlight tracks of the tour. Yeah, I have that. I have got that somewhere.
What I did notice is that the Fairlight, he plays a lot more with it. Like he plays more notes with it. Like even if it's in the background and it's basically doing what usually like a held pad would do.
Yeah,
he plays more with it. So he creates the mood, but it's dynamic. It's moving. It's constantly moving.
Yeah, it's more. Like, it's an animated sequence, and again, like based on this hammering idea between notes, and because of the delay treatment and the reverb treatment, and also the interesting panning. Like I don't know how they did it, but maybe they recorded the delay or two delays on different tracks, and as they were playing back, they were automating the panning of the delays, and that's why you get this really spacious kind of sound, right? Which I still think, like on this record, sounds really, really cool. It doesn't sound dated at all to me.
No, quite contrary. I think it has sort of a futuristic, utopian feel to it,
and kind of like fitting with the mood of the cover again, right? Like very much so. Yes. Yeah. And you know what's so beautiful about that section too? That there's mandolin in it. There's like I think I hear nylon string guitar, like nylon string guitar in there, and beautiful guitar tones on this record too. Like really, sort of moving forward from where it was before, going to like the sounds that like then really materialized with actually on believe it or not, on Earth Moving, when he had these like really filtered, like dark kind of sounds with lots of pitch bending of the strings and also like a whammy bar and stuff. And and Glenn, he said in my conversation with him that he also contributed a couple of lines in CRISES. In the song part of CRISES.
Not the solos, right?
He was doing solos on Shadow on the Wall, and in particular in the extended version, he has a solo, a real solo. The solo in the single version is both Mike and playing together, I think, harmony. Yeah.
How did he remember the sessions?
Well, he was very fond of it. I think like if people are interested, just look for a Markus Reuter podcast and go in. There's part 1 and part 2. It was like the way that he was recalling this was like not very structured, let's say. But he was a friend of Phil Spalding, who was not with us anymore. Like Phil Spalding would have been a person really to talk about the 80s stuff. He was such a lover of Mike's work, and as far as I know, there was sort of like an unfortunate event where they like lost contact then after Earth Moving. So, but anyway, it's worth kind of like collecting this. At some point, it would be so great to know more about how these records were made.
Yeah, time's running out a bit on that.
Time's running out. Like okay, like I'm gonna see Simon on the Cruise to the Edge, Simon Phillips.
Yeah.
So maybe I can, if there's a chance to talk with him, I can ask him. Yeah. And then Taurus 2, we haven't mentioned that at all yet.
Taurus 3, yeah.
Yeah, Taurus 3 is sort of like the little brother of the other Taurus pieces, and it's not really that obvious.
No.
The connection is really not that obvious, and I like that. I like that it's sort of hidden. And
I mean, there's people on YouTube who've put it together as a suite, and it's sort of the encore, maybe, if we can call it that. I don't know if there was ever an idea for a fourth part. Right now, it feels sort of as an encore, which I think it works as pretty great. I remember when he was on an MTV.
Yeah. With Ray Cox.
With Ray Cox, and they played it together. That was a rare, like, really humorous moment.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you something about that piece, actually. Towards the end, there's a moment where it's sort of before the final climax. Is there sort of major and minor at the same time? It's really with the bass underneath. Maybe we probably have to listen to it. But there was.
I mean, I can already tell you no, but then what also is more pronounced in the 5.1 mix of this album, of this track, Taurus 3, is that it's actually based, and it's on the album version. It's not that obvious. It's also based on the droning room simulator. There's one thick chord that sits behind the whole track. And in the 5.1 version, I think it's extended. You can hear more of it at the front, and it's louder in general. Okay. And so it's a drone, and then the piece is kind of like happening within that drone, actually. So it's kind of experimental. Like if you listen to it like on its own, like you don't really understand. It's like, oh, it's a little tune with two sections and like a short bridge or something like that. But no, it's sort of like can conceptually integrated into this droning space of this technology and of the vibe of the again mood piece. Like I think we've really hit the nail on the head with this. It's the same here. It's like a mood piece, and this little folk song happens within a futuristic droning space. It's not that obvious, like I said, on the album version, but that's what it is.
I really like listening to it on headphones. I don't generally like listening to music on headphones, but this one is great because the drums are really crisp and snappy, and the guitars are just, you hear all the resonances.
Yes,
it's amazing that he produced it himself with Simon.
Yeah, with Simon. It's really like compared to Discovery then, which really, it's like this was still recorded in Tilehouse Studios. I think, and then Mike moved the studio to Geneva or wherever it was in Switzerland for Discovery, and so this was like sort of the ideal setup, and he had the experience already having produced a couple albums there, and then I think it all comes together on this record.
Isn't the 5.1 of the title track also very different?
It's very different. It's you could say that it's as if Mike wasn't really remembering what the original sounded like. So when he remixed it, it's very different. Like there are a couple parts in there that you don't hear in the original, and I think whoever made the mix, probably with the engineer who was listening to him, Nigel Luby. It's the only time I hear Nigel Luby or is listed on.
Is he mentioned as for the 5.1? That's of course.
No, not for the 5.1. I'm talking about the original mix.
Yeah.
But like the original mix again is like massaged in a very strong, particular way, where again like all the there's, for example, there's like an acoustic bass sample in it, right? Which on the studio record sounds great because they managed to integrate it. But like if you hear it too dry, it sounds bad. Yeah. So and it kind of happens with the 5.1 version. But as for somebody like me who likes to study the songs, or the compositions, it's great to hear like a different take on it.
Yeah.
And like the other thing coming back to the banjo aspect, right? Shadow on the Wall, like in the version that's on the record, you don't hear the banjo that well, but there's like what the unplugged mix on the deluxe edition, where the banjo takes center, is the centerpiece. It's cool, really cool, and again, like that's also where the acoustic guitar is played that hard. So it's sort of like Shadow on the Wall and Moonlight Shadow come from the and Crisis. Those are the three songs, and well, actually, obviously, also Taurus 3. Sorry, it's like it's so it's only in High Places and A Foreign Affair that don't have any acoustic guitar played that way.
Yeah.
So there's another theme for you there.
By the way, there's a very nice cover version of In High Places as a children's lullaby. It's on an album of song, like variation, sort of tunes played for children to fall asleep to. And In High Places one.
Yeah, I've never heard that.
And I think that was really smart because it actually works. And I think if you think about it, it has that mood sort of. It's this dreamy world. And so they really thought about it. It must have been someone who really liked the original. They didn't just cover anything. They didn't just put anything to in this version, but they actually they saw and heard something in that piece that was actually there, which I thought was really remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, I think we did say quite a bit. I'm sure, like we're missing a lot of things again here. Like, for example, I love the guitar, the arrangement of the guitars in the title track, like the three-part harmony on the guitars and stuff. It's just beautiful, like with how they collaborated on that. Like I think that and Glenn, like, because they were together in the studio, Mike and Glenn and Rick Fan. And so, like, if you're sitting together and you're playing, like Mike say, maybe shows a little melody and say, okay, let's find harmonies to this. And then they came up with these beautiful things. I think that's another really, really special feature of this record, both in the first half of Crisis and the second half of Crisis, the song.
I would assume that in a way, sort of different things came together that were happening at the same time when they were the sections which are not that which are non-Tubular Bells directly related. Those apparently came from sound checking during the tour and then finding out sections which they all liked, and then I think he combined it with the reworkings in his mind of Tubular Bells, which he was constantly reworking on the live circuit.
Yes.
And then the incredible new opportunities of that electronic music offered. And so that he brought that together, and it somehow fit. It somehow slotted together. Maybe because it was constantly being played out while he was touring.
Yeah. You see, like I'm just reminded of because I was thinking, okay, maybe is there really anything on this that's not Tubular Bells inspired? And I guess you'll be right about that. But some of those guitar, like those 6/8, the shuffly parts, that's also Tubular Bells already.
I cannot believe I didn't actually hear that when I first heard it. I had a hard time, but now I agree.
Yeah. So and also there's the little instrumental coda of the song where Mike sings "Crisis, Crisis," and he also says, "I need you by my side." Because there's a crisis.
Yes.
That's also interesting because like who is you?
Yeah.
That's like interesting. But anyway, so there's this little instrumental coda, and then it also took me a while to understand that it's actually like again like one of the very few or maybe the only instance of a 9/8 bar in Mike's music. Because 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. So it's 9. It's really cool. It's like it's special. Like so to discover these little things. Yeah, and then the Watcher and the Tower, for example, like that piece, like where does that come from? And then there is like this little dissonant which goes on the, which you would say, okay, maybe it was an accident in the studio or something, but then no, they played exactly like that live with those wrong notes. and it's so cool.
Just as an aside, as you mentioned that there's a light in the tower on in the very first.
Yes.
I misunderstood the lyrics, or maybe I didn't, as the watcher in the tower.
Yes.
I always thought it was the watcher in the tower, which.
Yes, and I still think it's confusing because people are not. I think it's and.
Well, it says in the lyrics it says and,
Yeah.
but I hear him in,
Yeah.
and maybe the light in there suggests
Yes.
someone is looking back at the watcher on the other side.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Well, that's a nice thought maybe to conclude.
Yes.
As you said, I agree. It's probably there's more in there, and I sometimes I just fall into the album, and I find it harder for this to reflect on it because I just fall into it and lose myself, which I really don't have with that much music. So I like the fact that maybe even though the songs are, it has more of a song structure, it's still inexplicable. It retains its mystery.
For me, certainly. For me, really, it really does. In a way, like this, it's so funny. Like this reverberant space, almost that opens the record, is kind of like embracing the whole thing.
Yeah, it's like a bracket.
Yeah, and even Shadow on the Wall.
Yeah.
Right, like even that's the kind of like so dry, and kind of over the top with the actual mic preamp distorting on the vocal, and like the thing that people hate about it. I think it's just, I mean, how cool do you have to be as an artist to also like have a singer define your song so much?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And actually, of course, the room simulator, it's mentioned in the instruments, among the instruments.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
enough.
Yes, you're right.
How many albums are you going to find where you have mention of the reverb unit used in a
as the
recording?
instrument? Yes, exactly.
Not very
Yes,
common.
yeah. Okay, so I guess that this sort of like for me concludes like it's the first 10 years, but it's also sort of like the first really part of Mike's career.
Yeah, I certainly thought about the fact that I didn't know, as you mentioned in the last one, that he stopped touring, but it seems to fit because as he was, as the success of Moonlight Shadow brought him towards a more pop oriented audience, and he was playing to bigger halls, or he had been playing to bigger halls, and he was in Germany. He was until 1989 one of the biggest album artists around. He was now also moving into popular and like mainstream media.
Yes.
And there are plenty, like one of the reasons I think that we know so little creatively about this period is that he probably doesn't really like thinking back about it to it all that much, or at least in the book it seems that way. And the interviews are so bad.
Yes.
There's one, I don't know if you've seen it, about from Formula 1, which was Germany's big popular music television program in public television. And the guy interviews him, and he actually doesn't, it's almost like he doesn't know the artist. Like he had to ask, how much, this is now your album number, which is this?
Yeah.
And he's completely oblivious to the career.
Yes.
And so I think public perception must have been different of him and maybe his own perception of his work. And so I think that must have had an influence on the music that's been created, with Discovery being purely song-oriented. Islands has a very different style and so forth. I think it's, as you said, there is a cutoff, even though obviously a lot, I mean, he doesn't completely change, but there's a transition.
Yes. And for me, Discovery and Islands are sort of like almost standalone albums.
Yeah.
Where Discovery connects to CRISES quite a bit, yes, because of, well, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks, Tobias, for another inspiring conversation. And yes, bye-bye.
See you soon. See you soon.